what the people of Cote d'Ivoire will be thinking and doing in the near future if they allow this to go unanswered. That's my appeal to the United States State Department, to the United Nations, and to the French. With that, I yield the floor. I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Akaka.
Speakers lined up, and when they come in, I'll be glad to yield the floor to them. In the meantime, let me just make a couple of comments about the discussion of today that everyone's addressing, the Democrats and Republicans. I've been here for a number of years. I have seen different administrations come through. I think this is the first time the American people have finally woken up to the fact that we finally have gotten to a point where we can't continue to do as what we have been doing. When President Obama came into office, he came out with his first budget, then his second budget, then his third budget. If you add these budgets up, what he has done, and he has successfully, since he had total control of the House and the Senate, been able to pass these budgets, that he has added more debt to our national debt in 2 years than every president throughout in the history of this country, every president from George Washington to George W. Bush. I can remember coming to this floor when I was outraged back in 1995. Then President Clinton came up with a budget, and that budget was a $1.5 trillion budget. This budget that President Obama has come out with is not just $1.5 trillion, it's $3.5 trillion, and the deficit alone for this 1 year is greater than the entire budget was for the entire year of fiscal year 1996. And it can't happen. You can't continue to do that. And consequently, and I criticize some of my Republican friends, a lot of them voted for the $700 billion bailout back in October in 2008. Then, of course, none of the Republicans voted for the $800 billion stimulus package. And, you know, right now they're quibbling over it. Well, can you really cut $6 billion or $60 billion from the budget? And yet they passed an $800 billion stimulus package, spending. It's never been done before in the history of this country. And it's got to stop now. And I think we have. I've watched what Paul Ryan's doing over there. Boy, I mean, that's heavy lifting. That's tough. But he's talking about doing something that is very real. I see my good friend from Utah has come in. With that, I will yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Utah.
Well, I thank my great colleague and appreciate him. Madam President, sometimes it amazes me how quickly debates change here in Washington. At this time in 2009, President Obama was riding high. Heralded as the second coming of Franklin Roosevelt, the conventional wisdom was that his election represented a sea change in the attitudes of American taxpayers. Where his Democratic predecessor came to Congress and announced that the era of big government is over, President Obama came to Washington convinced that the era of big government was just beginning. With historic majorities in both houses of Congress, he and his Capitol Hill allies set about the business of transforming the nation's economy with massive jolts of new government spending and regulation. They cultivated an unholy alliance with big labor, big business, and big government. And the hoped-for result was a corporatist state where government bureaucrats would calculate the fair share that business would contribute to finance the administration's redistributionist policies. They exploited the growth of the federal government through ordinary appropriations and the stimulus. Democrats hiked up non-defense discretionary appropriations by 24% in the last 2 years, and by 84% if you count the stimulus bill. But as an American songwriter once put it, the times, they are changing. Later this week, we will be considering the continuing resolution that gets us to the end of fiscal year 2011. To hear the left talk, you would think that this proposal is shuttering agencies left and right. They say that we have cut discretionary spending to the bone. This, of course, is a little bit melodramatic. Before the Republicans won in November, the federal government was on pace to spend $3.8 trillion. That's $3,800 billion. And the CR continuing resolution we will vote on reduces spending by $38 billion. $38 billion in spending reductions from spending of $3,800 billion, or $3.8 trillion, whichever you like. That's not exactly cutting to the bone. I agree with my colleagues who say that we need to reduce spending by even more. Facing our third consecutive year with more than a $1 trillion projected deficit, these cuts barely scratch the surface of what needs to be done. But make no mistake about it, even these cuts would have been impossible if not for the Republicans taking back the House and making gains in the Senate last November. When Republicans won, they changed the debate in Washington. Even the press has been forced to acknowledge the depth of our fiscal crisis, though old habits die hard. Just this morning, we witnessed a relapse in the mainstream media as it did its best to enable excessive spending. The headline on the front page of today's Washington Post screamed, quote, "Cuts will affect vast spectrum of priorities," unquote. This made me think of the old joke about the likely reporting at the New York Times on the outbreak of a nuclear conflict. Nuclear war breaks out, women and minorities hardest hit. But I should not be too hard on the press. They seem to be getting it. There's certainly no denying it. We are spending way more than we are taking in, and absent real reductions in spending and meaningful reforms to entitlements, this country is cruising toward a legitimate debt crisis that will adversely impact every American family. This desire to reduce spending and restore the Constitution's limits on the size of government is the new normal for taxpayers. The Obama administration's salad days, when they dreamed of permanently expanding the size of the federal government, are way back in the rearview mirror. I notice the distinguished majority leader is here if he needs to.
Madam President,
The Majority Leader.
if my dear friend, the senior senator from Utah, would allow me to interrupt him, which he just agreed to do, I would ask that we be in a period of morning business for debate only until 6 p.m. today. Senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each, and at 6 p.m. I be recognized.
Without objection.
Madam President, I hope the record will, I ask consent that the record will not appear as I interrupted my friend from Utah.
Without objection.
And again, I appreciate his normal courtesy that has extended me for decades. I appreciate it very much.
I appreciate the majority leader. Well, I said the Obama administration's salad days, when they dreamed of permanently expanding the size of the federal government, are way back in the rearview mirror. Because of the undeniable seriousness of our debts and deficits and the commitment of Republicans to taking it on, the debate has shifted from how do we enlarge the size of government to how can we scale it back. The administration was slow to recognize this. When given his first opportunity to weigh in on this crisis, the President voted present. His fiscal year 2012 budget was laughable for its failure to take on our deficits and growing debt. When Ezra Klein, the liberal Washington Post reporter, could not carry the President's water on this one, even he couldn't carry the President's water on this one. He wrote that when reading the budget, it's almost like the Fiscal Commission never happened. The President's Fiscal Commission recommended over $4 trillion in spending reductions, including adjustments to entitlements. I can't say that I agree with everything in the Commission's proposal, but it was a serious effort to get our nation's finances back in order. But the President chose to pretend that this report did not exist. Well, since then, they must have done some polling over at the White House. They must have realized that on the most critical issue facing the country, American taxpayers and American families want something more from their President. They want leadership. The President of the United States can't just subcontract out these issues to other people. The President of the United States has to lead. And in these areas, it takes the President. He has to be bold. He has to take a stand. For all of the elegiac comparisons of President Obama to Abraham Lincoln, Franklin Roosevelt, and Ronald Reagan, those were not passive presidents. On the big issues, they took big risks, and they led the country. It seems like the President's advisors have finally figured this out. They need to get involved in a serious way on the issue of federal spending. Sitting back and adding nothing while your allies demagogue reasonable solutions to pressing problems is simply not acceptable to the American people. Democrats tried this tired line of attack last week, alleging that Republicans were out to hurt the poor, the disabled, and the elderly. These smears really are beneath the dignity of our elected officials, and they show a total disregard for the common sense of American citizens and the good faith and charity of those who support Republicans. A good first step for the President would be to disavow these statements. He has a chance to do so tomorrow. The President is giving a much-hyped speech tomorrow on the issue of spending and getting our deficits and debt under control. I can only say that I hope that he comes through. The people of my home state of Utah and the people of every state are demanding that Washington tackle out-of-control spending. And vague outlines or statements of principle are not going to do it. The President needs to take a stand, or should I say stands. And I would add that the American people don't want solutions to a spending crisis that involve higher taxes. The solution to a spending crisis is not higher taxes that will give the government more money to spend. Our problem is not that citizens are taxed too little. Our problem is that government spends too much. So the President needs to come forward with serious, concrete proposals and commit to working with Congressman Ryan, Speaker Boehner, and Senate Republicans to solve this problem. I am willing to give the President a mulligan on his first budget proposal. The President, like members of Congress, represents the people. As representatives of the people, we must acknowledge those times when we get it wrong. When the people make it clear that they want their elected officials to go in a different direction, in a democratic republic, it is only right that the President and the Congress give voice to their concerns. The President seems to understand that he got it wrong with his first budget. Taxpayers and families want Washington to take on spending, but the people will not be fooled. If the President comes out tomorrow and speaks in vague generalities, if he comes out and simply defers to Congress, he will have satisfied no one. Being the President of the United States is not like being a law professor. Your job is not merely to facilitate dialogue. Your job is to lead. I look forward to the President's remarks tomorrow. I guess we would call it the President's Budget Part 2. My hope is that the sequel will be better than the original. With that, Madam Chairman, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
the quorum call be vitiated?
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that floor privileges be granted to Ashley White of my staff for the duration of consideration of the pending bill.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I rise today to talk about a matter that's very important to our country, to Minnesota, and to me: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education, or STEM education for short. As I've traveled around Minnesota, I've heard from many of our high-tech businesses that they fear our students won't be ready to take on the jobs waiting for them when they graduate. And as a result, these jobs will go unfilled and our economy will founder. This is not just true in Minnesota, of course, but across the country, in Pennsylvania, the presiding officer's state, and everywhere in our nation. That's why I'm addressing our need for a well-trained STEM workforce through the STEM Master Teacher Corps Act, which has been co-sponsored by my colleagues, Senators Lieberman and Shaheen. We've been hearing concern about the state of STEM education in our country for over a decade now. In 2000, a 25-member commission headed by former Senator John Glenn published a report called Before It's Too Late, which addressed the pressing need for high-quality math and science teaching. 5 years later, another report, Rising Above the Gathering Storm, presented the findings and recommendations of a National Academies Commission chaired by former Lockheed Martin CEO Norm Augustine concerning the deterioration of STEM education and basic research. Last year, a follow-up report, dramatically titled Rapidly Approaching Category 5 Hurricane, warned us that the, quote, gathering storm is now threatening to wipe out U.S. leadership in global science and technology if we don't act fast, and it said so with good reason. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, nearly every one of the 30 fastest-growing professions require STEM skills. These include jobs in some of the fields that are most critical to the future of our country: healthcare, energy, climate change, and national security. And yet, too few kids are graduating from high school with the interests or the preparation to successfully pursue STEM degrees in college. Well over half of college students in China and Japan major in STEM fields, compared with only one-third of U.S. citizens. International standardized tests show that we rank only average or below average in students' math and science performance. The 2009 Program for International Student Assessment placed American 15-year-olds 25th in math and 17th in science out of 34 OECD countries, so there are the developed countries. And what's worse is that we're spending more on education per student than any other OECD country in the world except for Luxembourg. As Congress works to reform No Child Left Behind this year, and the presiding officer is working with me on that, on the Help Committee, I urge my colleagues to consider strongly the importance of STEM education and how to spend our limited resources most effectively. President Obama has proposed recruiting and training 100,000 new STEM teachers in the next decade and has requested $100 million to advance this worthy goal. However, many STEM teachers leave the profession within their first few years of teaching, often drawn by far more lucrative salaries elsewhere in science and technology fields. Those talents are valued in the market. So if we're going to invest in recruiting and training new teachers, we also need to invest in retaining and best utilizing those individuals. The STEM Master Teacher Corps Act is based on a proposal brought forth by President Obama's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. It will provide the top K-12 STEM teachers in a participating area with additional professional development so that they can become leaders in their schools and in their communities. Master teachers will mentor their younger or less effective peers, giving them guidance and inspiring them to stay in teaching. Master teachers will also network with one another, sharing best practices and classroom resources. Together, these measures will improve the quality and the ability of all teachers, their ability to impart strong STEM skills and an eagerness to learn and pass that on to their students. Providing career advancement opportunities to effective STEM teachers and support to beginning teachers will help increase retention, so our investments in recruitment and training will have an even greater payoff. In recognition of their excellent work and new leadership responsibility, it's only fair that these master teachers should be compensated, so my legislation also gives them a salary bump. Our teachers work just as hard as other STEM professionals, and it's time we started recognizing that and paying them accordingly. According to the National Association of Colleges and Employers, the median salary offered to recent college graduates in certain STEM-related fields, including physics, computer science, accounting, and engineering, is $24,000 higher than that offered to a new secondary school teacher and $30,000 higher than that offered to a new elementary school teacher. This legislation has been endorsed by more than 60 national and regional groups, ranging from educational organizations like the National Education Association, the American Federation of Teachers, the College Board, and Education Minnesota, to business groups like Life Science Alley, the Bio Business Alliance of Minnesota, and the Minnesota High Tech Association. The bill is also supported by rural groups like the National Rural Education Association and Rural School and Community Trust, and numerous science and math societies. I am particularly pleased to have the endorsement of two leading national businesses that also happen to be headquartered in my home state, Medtronic and 3M. Both of these companies recognize and support the importance of acting now to ensure a well-trained workforce for the future, and they've already shown a proactive interest in supporting and engaging students in STEM activities. I was just recently at a FIRST Robotics event at the University of Minnesota that was astounding. It had two huge auditorium of these, over 130 teams competing in Minnesota in this robotics competition. So I'm very grateful for the support of 3M and of Medtronic. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the bill full list of endorsers be included in the record, and I have a list here to show how impressive it is.
Without objection.
Thank you. The Master Teacher Corps program addresses the recommendations presented in the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technologies 2010 K-12 STEM Education Report, and tracks the priorities laid out more than 10 years ago in the Glenn Commission report. Specifically, it would establish an ongoing system to improve the quality of mathematics and science teaching in grades K-12, and it would improve the working environment and make the teaching profession more attractive for K-12 mathematics and science teachers. With the planned reform and reauthorization of No Child Left Behind this year, we have a rare and indeed ideal opportunity to implement real change in K-12 STEM education in this country. So let's act now before it's too late, before the storm has fully gathered, and before that rapidly approaching Category 5 hurricane destroys the competitive technological edge and prosperity that our country has worked so hard to build and maintain. I urge my colleagues to join Senator Lieberman, Senator Shaheen, and me in supporting a sustained investment in K-12 STEM teacher quality and in raising the status of the teaching profession through the STEM Master Teacher Corps Act. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the bill's text be included in the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I'd also like to take a moment to congratulate the University of Minnesota Duluth men's hockey team for capturing their first ever NCAA Division I championship. The UMD Bulldogs faced off against the Michigan Wolverines in St. Paul this past Saturday, and wow, it was an amazing game. Over 19,000 fans packed the XL Energy Center to watch a nail-biter, really, is what it was. Goaltender Sean Hunwick of Michigan and UMD's Kenny Ryder kept the game close, neither allowing a goal in the third period and sending the game into overtime. Stuck at 2-2, Bulldog Travis Olasuk gathered the puck behind the Michigan goal just 3 minutes into the extra period. With the puck on his backhand, Olasuk slid a pass in front of the net to hard-charging teammate Kyle Schmidt of Hermantown, Minnesota. Kyle, only 10 days removed from hand surgery, buried the puck from just outside the crease. And in a moment of pure exuberance, he skated to the half line and dove onto his back, performing what I believe was a snow angel as he slid on the ice. It was something to see. It was one of the most thrilling finishes in college hockey history. After 50 long years, Kyle's overtime goal gave the Minnesota Duluth Bulldogs their first ever men's hockey NCAA championship. In his 10th year at the helm, Coach Scott Sandlin led a tenacious and skilled Bulldog team that dominated on the power play and got timely goaltending throughout the tournament. And I would be remiss if I didn't commend the Michigan Wolverines, who played fiercely and deserved congratulations for an excellent final game. I know everyone at the University of Minnesota Duluth must still have smiles on their face after their victory, and I congratulate the players and the coaches and the fans on a triumphant season. And I would also be remiss if I didn't say that last year the women's hockey team, the Bulldogs also, won the women's NCAA hockey Division I hockey tournament. So kudos to the University of Minnesota Duluth and the Bulldogs. And Mr. President, I yield the floor and would note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
understand we're in a quorum call.
Yes.
I would ask that that be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to talk just for a few minutes about an incident that's unfolding in Arkansas that I'm sure is unfolding in other states as well. About, say, less than 2 weeks ago, a 73-year-old woman and her husband received a letter from FEMA, and FEMA demanded that this couple pay back $27,000 in FEMA assistance they had received 3 years earlier, and that they do it within 30 days or face penalties, interest, etc. Well, this is devastating news for her. These are Social Security recipients. They lost everything in a flood. And let me back up and tell the full story and tell the rest of the story. 3 years ago, Arkansas had some floods on the White River, and the folks in the Mountain View area, some of them, experienced very severe flooding. FEMA came to this couple's house, walked around, told them on the spot that they were eligible to receive FEMA assistance for the flooding. And the maximum you can receive is $30,000. They filled out the paperwork. In fact, FEMA helped them do some of that. Like I said, on the spot, while FEMA was visiting their home and looking at their property, FEMA assured her that that they would qualify for this. They fill out the paperwork. They go through the process. Apparently, at some point, there's even an appeal or some sort of clarification. It went through the proper channels at FEMA. FEMA was there. They took pictures, the whole deal. They verified the damage. This couple received $27,000 in FEMA assistance. They put every dime back into their home. This is a couple that basically lost almost all their worldly possessions in this flood. I talked to her a week or so ago, and she told me that they were able to save a few items of glassware and a few keepsakes from the family, but basically everything was either washed away in the water or so caked with mud it was ruined during the flood. The $27,000 helped repair their home and make it habitable, but it didn't restore their home anywhere close to the condition it was before the flood. This was their dream home, their retirement home. They live right there on the White River, and it's a beautiful part of the state. So they get this letter a couple of weeks ago. Bear in mind, this flood happened 3 years ago. 3 years ago, this flood happened. And they are now required under the rules and regs and the law even that FEMA works with, they're required to pay all this money back. As I said before, this is a terrible hardship. As it turns out, what happened here is these folks, although they were assured by FEMA that they were eligible, they were actually never qualified to receive this money. They didn't know that. They had FEMA in their living room telling them that they were qualified and that they should receive the money, that they meet all the tests and all the standards, that this is what this program is for, is to help people like this. However, there was one glitch or one technicality, and that was that the county where they lived had not passed an ordinance to go into the FEMA flood insurance program. Now, here again, FEMA should have known this. FEMA apparently went to some of the county meetings where it was discussed and voted down, but nonetheless, FEMA assured the people that they would be covered under this program. The irony of all this is this couple, when they bought their home on the White River, one of the preconditions, one of the requirements that they set for themselves is that they would purchase flood insurance. They had it for a number of years. They paid premiums for a number of years, never had a flood, paid premiums for a number of years. Finally, the insurance company that offered the flood insurance got out of the business, and so they even went to the extent of going through Lloyd's of London to get flood insurance, paid a premium, a lot of money for their premium, But they nonetheless carried that as long as it was offered, and finally it wasn't offered. And the only things left is the FEMA flood insurance program, the National Flood Insurance Program. And because the county had not done what they were supposed to do, then this lady, therefore, this couple, therefore, was not eligible to receive the FEMA flood money. Again, no fault of her own. She'd done everything that anybody could do. They had paid for their premiums out of their pockets as long as they could, as long as they could find insurance. As that was canceled over the years, the county hadn't come through, but apparently FEMA was actually there at the county meetings, and FEMA knew or should have known that she wasn't eligible. Give this $27,000. Now they want it all back with interest and penalties, et cetera. So, Mr. President, what I've done today is I filed the Disaster Assistance Recoupment Fairness Act. And we actually have it in two forms. We have it as a standalone measure. We also have it as an amendment to the bill that's pending on the floor right now. The important point of this story is that all of the mistakes that were made were on FEMA's side of the equation. The couple in Arkansas made no mistakes. They followed the rules, went through the process, went through the hearings. There's no allegation of fraud or anything that was in any way misleading. They gave them the documents. They did everything they were supposed to do. It's textbook where they did everything they were supposed to do, but FEMA is now coming back asking for recoupment. So what our bill will do is not give a blanket exception, but what it will do is give the FEMA administrator the authority, under circumstances he deems fit, to waive the debt that's owed to the U.S. in cases where funds were distributed by a FEMA error, like in this case. And also, it gives them the discretion that they don't have under current federal law. I met with Director Fugate on this a week or two ago, and actually we had a very constructive meeting. I think probably on a personal level, he understands this, he feels bad about this, but he feels like his hands are tied under the statute. I'm not 100% sure they are, but he says they are, and he tried to be very helpful, very accommodating, and I think he really does want to work with all the parties involved to try to clean this up. But he says he doesn't have the authority. That's where this bill comes in. That's where this amendment comes in. We'd like to give FEMA, the FEMA director, the authority to have some discretion on some of these hardship-type cases, especially where the person who received the benefit did it purely by a FEMA error. And again, in their case, they put every dime of their recovery back into their home just to have it livable, and otherwise they probably would have had to abandon their home or, sell the property or whatever the case may have been. But so, Mr. President, that is what we are asking of the Senate, that they would consider this at the proper time. I'd ask my colleagues to take a look at it. My guess is, since we have 35 households in our state that are receiving these type of letters from FEMA, these demand letters where they're giving a notice of debt to folks who've received money, my guess is if we have 35 in our state, there's hundreds and maybe thousands around the country who are in a similar situation. Again, our bill is really just for FEMA's mistakes. This is probably an example of a cleanup from the previous FEMA administration. I think Director Fugate really had nothing to do with this. It took them 3 years because there was a lawsuit in the meantime. So what this is doing is creating a hardship for folks who really have been playing by the rules. It just gives FEMA the flexibility to do some of this cleanup in a way that doesn't harm ordinary citizens here in Arkansas. So, here in the U.S. So I'd like to ask my colleagues to take a look at it. I would be proud and available to answer any questions. If anyone has those, they can always contact me or my office. And, Mr. President, what I'd like to do is not call it up at this point or anything like that, but be available and maybe be in the queue for some time in the near future. And, Mr. President, with that, I'm going to yield the floor, and I would suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka?